Hello ladies and gentlemen, you're watching NDTV. The Supreme Court on Monday sought the presence of 5 social media influencers, including Samay Raina, on a plea by an NGO which alleged that they ridiculed persons with a rare muscular disorder. Now the court has asked Mumbai Commissioner of Police to serve notice to these stand-up comics to ensure that their presence in court is maintained, failing which they said coercive action would be taken. Tonight we confront a troubling question. In a digital age that's driven by likes and laughs, have we lost sight of basic human dignity? When mockery, especially of people with disabilities, becomes mainstream, where do we really draw the line? Is legal and criminal action justified, or even a deterrent to make our society, particularly our youngsters, mindful and sensitive? That's what we discuss tonight. Before I go to my guests, let me also give you, in a nutshell, the background to this case. In a video titled Narak, which has since then been removed by YouTube, comic Samay Raina made a joke about the high cost of treating a months-old child with spinal muscular atrophy, suggesting that some might hesitate to spend such a large sum on a child given the age of the child. He was also reported to have made some insensitive remarks over persons with visual impairment. How do we see this? That's what we discussed tonight. Joining us now is Radhika Vaz, who's a comic and a writer. We have Nipun Malhotra, founder of Nipman Foundation. He's also the director of Quantum Hub. And we have Arman Ali, who is executive director NCPEDP. Thank you all of you for joining me on this broadcast. We'll be joined by more guests in just a bit. Radhika, to you first. Let me confess that I watch stand-up comedy, and I do believe that there are times, like we see in recent past, some artists saying things that could be completely offensive. But overall, many times I do think that many of these young comics are speaking on issues such as mental health, patriarchy, and they do call out a lot of stuff that mainstream, entertainers have not. But there are also instances like this when you wonder if, our young artists need to have those filters, those sensitivity, that kind of mindfulness. As an artist, tell me, where do you draw that line?
Thank you so much for having me, obviously, on this show. I'm very happy to be here. I think the question of whether sensitivity or free speech, which is more important, I actually think it's a flawed question in a sense, because both are extremely important, and it almost feels to me like asking me, which one of your parents would you like to die first? I mean, how can I make that choice as a comedian or as a human being for that matter? As far as disabilities go, what I think is actually almost, it's so sad that it's amusing, is that, my father has Parkinson's, and because of Parkinson's, he can't see anymore, and he is in a wheelchair. And 99% of our buildings in this country, including those built by our government, are not accessible to people with disabilities, including hospitals. Like, my father can't even go to a hospital unless he has an assistant with him. So, we have made life so difficult with people, for people with disabilities. In fact, people without disabilities. I was just taking a walk in the evening, and the pavements I live in Gurgaon, in a city like Gurgaon, the pavements are unsafe for people of all abilities, let alone those without, So we live in an environment that's not friendly to disabled people at all. Yet we're very concerned about this joke. And, you had said something about young people becoming mindful and understanding what the issues are for people with disabilities. My nephew, a 10-year-old boy, is on the autism spectrum. And there are children in his class whose mothers will not allow them to play with him or come for his birthday party. And to me, young people learn from their parents. They don't learn from us comedians. They listen to us and they move on. But where they learn is at home. So if we still don't allow our kids to marry people with disabilities, if we still discriminate against them in ways where, they can't even go into a building properly without 3 people carrying a wheelchair up a ramp, then what does it matter if we joke about it? I'm unclear about how that is so offensive.
Okay, that's a good question. Abha Khetarpal also joins us. She's a disability activist. Before that, Nipun, should freedom of expression on social media come with a responsibility to protect dignity of vulnerable groups? What kind of impact does it have on people who have lived that life? People with disabilities who live that life. When you hear something like that on TV, on YouTube, how does that impact your struggles? How does that impact your ability to resist all the wrongs that have been happening in society?
No, I think that's a very good question. Unfortunately, Samay Raina, I think, has been a serial offender when it comes to persons with disabilities. This is not really the only video in which he's laughed at persons with disabilities. There was also an episode of India's Got Latent where he was really mimicking, one of his contestants was mimicking people who limp, people who cannot speak properly, etc. And I had myself, in fact, done a case against him at the Chief Commissioner's Court for Persons with Disabilities regarding that particular case. And I'll tell you why these videos are extremely offensive. Because what also happens is that at schools and colleges, when influencers start making these videos and people see them, they often start mimicking these same videos in schools and colleges when they see a person with a disability as well. So it's not just about a Samay Raina doing it, but it's also the responsibility that he has towards his followers, who might start, repeating the same stuff in front of persons with disabilities, which is something which is extremely negative. The second point that I want to make is really, the fact that the Supreme Court has actually come up with guidelines on portrayal of persons with disabilities in visual media. This was last year when I'd actually done a case against this movie by Sony Pictures called Aak Mein Chodi, which made a lot of fun of people with disabilities and also really tried to show that if you're a person with a disability and you want to get married, the only way to get married is really if you pretend that you do not have a disability or you hide your disability. I had actually taken it to the Supreme Court, and the then Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud had actually come up with guidelines separating disability humor, which is acceptable, which basically laughs at situations persons with disabilities face, which can actually create awareness, versus disabling humor, which is laughing at the disability itself, which people like Samay Raina are regularly indulging in, and which is extremely unfortunate.
Right. Also, we have L. Ravichandar, who's a lawyer. Before that, Arman Ali, can you also tell us if our legal system is equipped to hold influencers accountable for digital ableism? Because, every time we talk about this, there's also the sense that, there is freedom of speech, right? And then these are also young people who have a lot of followers. How should the legal system be equipped to deal with something like this?
Obviously, it will have to walk on it. It has to perform the task of a trapeze artist. It will have to tightrope walk. While, I completely agree that we are a nation without a sense of humor, in the sense that people can laugh at these kind of jokes, and we can create these kind of jokes, that we can even look at these people as a source of humor, shows that we have a horrendous sense of humor. Having said that, I believe that courts' capacity to deal with the freedom of expression is just as important as what is expressed. I completely agree. I don't think there can be two opinions that what was shot in the name of humor was crass, was insensitive, was in fact violative of Section 92 of the Right of Persons with Disabilities Act. Having said that, I do not think what the Supreme Court did was the right thing. Because please understand, human freedom gets always affected not by the very liberal thinking aspects of freedom, but our capacity to deal with the extremes. Now, I know that these humorists are not humorists, they are caricatures, but I think it was highly disproportionate manner in which the Supreme Court said, we want them to come and appear over here. What are they dealing with? They are dealing in the context of a petition saying we want to regulate the whole system.
Okay, that's an important thing. Arman Ali, do you think that police action, criminal action, legal action, Supreme Court cracking down on something like that would really help building that kind of sensitivity that we aspire for?
Of course, I think one of the ways that this can work, you would recall, I kind of filed a police complaint on the cricketers who were mocking people with disability in their celebrity dance after winning Champions Legends Trophy in London. And that police complaint could never get converted into an FIR because there's an acute lack of awareness about the disability law in general. There is no compliance. I would say that how is a Meta or any other platform which is allowing this kind of content to come, which is in violation of the Section 92 of RPWD Act. And it's a got serious problem. I think people don't know the lived experience of people with disability in India, the cost of disability that you live with on an everyday basis. For an SMA patient or a family with somebody who has an SMA, the treatment cost is about 50 lakh to 88 crore. I mean, can you even imagine and with no support from the government, the insurance doesn't give you insurance. I mean, every day is a struggle. And each time you ridicule a person with disability, you are pushing them 10 years behind. if you look at the N for No's report on education in India, if you look at the UNICEF report, the Government of India's report on school, one of the major reasons of dropout of school of children with disability is because they've been ridiculed, they've been mimicked by their classmates. And this instance of Samay Raina, who have got millions of views, they set a trend, and there are many other influencers who are small time from small villages are also doing it, and you will find hundreds of such videos doing around. We get a lot of people report it to us, but there's so much that you can do.
Right.
And my question is again with platforms like Meta and so on, or YouTube, what are they doing to keep regulations of like laws like RPWD Act and so on?
Right. Abha Khetarpal, there was a beautiful thing that Radhika also talked about, children with, children who are on the spectrum. And I know that it takes a long while to accept that, somebody's child could be on the spectrum. There's a lot of denial that happens when parents, watch videos like this. What kind of impact does it have on them, especially with the SMA that both Nipun and Arman Ali spoke about? What kind of impact does it have on caregivers, on parents, on family members, who are really, in some ways, the only, support that the child, or for that matter, the young person has?
Yeah, I would say that this is promoting a culture of bullying. Such kind of jokes, this is not a joke, this is crap. And it is like we fight every day for our survival. We get up in the morning, we have our own battles. But when such things are reduced to the cheap talk, they are reduced. This is cruel. This is cruel for the caregivers, for the family members, and everyone. It causes there is a culture of ableism, and they internalize that ableism, whether they are family members or the person with disability himself or herself. Like, I am a woman with disability, and if somebody passes a joke on my body structure, I would definitely feel offended because of our deformities. And if we are just reduced to jokes or punchlines, this is cruel. It perpetuates dehumanization. And the careers that thrive on exploiting other people's sufferings, and they are profiteering from them. So such kind of careers, they definitely have to be unsustainable, as they are unethical. So the parents and the caregivers and the persons with disabilities themselves, they feel that they are inferior. It is they are given a feeling that they are inferior to others, and there is a divide between us and them, and a whole lot of things. That there is perpetuation of stereotypes.
Right. Radhika was, as an artist, as a comic, how do you feel, is there a challenge, is there a pressure to also create content that's viral? Because I do feel sometimes the system is against you, because, how do we create empathy in a system that is often driven with rewards that are based on how viral the content is, or how sort of quirky the content is? And in a system like that, how important is it to also have empathy and also be successful?
So, I think that's, something we all struggle with, I'm sure. Having empathy, you have empathy. You have to have empathy as a human being. I don't know whether that's just something comedians should be told to have. It's everyone should have empathy. And we all draw our lines at separate places. For me, I feel like, quality of comedy should be something that we concern ourselves with, and not go for the lowest hanging fruit. But the question I think I have is, at what point do we draw the line where we are, making all these criminal cases against these people, hoping that will create empathy? I'm not sure that those two things, I don't understand where that is. I completely agree that we must have empathy. But I also wonder how can we teach people empathy with the criminal cases? I'm not sure that that's helping anything.
Right. Also, Nipun, between free speech is sacrosanct, don't like it, don't listen, and comedy is not funny when it comes at the expense of someone else. And here I do believe that there are no two sides to this. We cannot go back on what we have gained in terms of, having language that's respectful, having language that's dignified, that doesn't dehumanize people. So clearly there are no two sides. But, when you talk about balance, making fun of disability is clearly in poor taste. But how do you urge people to draw the line here?
No, I think this is something which is obviously thin balance that one has to maintain. And which is why I'll come back to what Chief Justice Diva Chandrachud Reddy said in his particular judgment, where he said that one needs to differentiate between disability humor and disabling humor. Where disability humor is really humor around situations persons with disabilities face rather than targeting the person with the disability themselves. Whereas disabling humor is where you're laughing at the disability itself and demeaning the person because of that. For example, in Samay Raina's this particular case where this case has been done, you're talking about a kid and the cure that the kid is being given and talking about whether it is worth spending that money. Imagine what the parents of the child must be going through when they're seeing this particular video. Or when he's really imitating somebody who's limping and then that is replicated all across the country by college students because they think that if Samay Raina is doing it, it's acceptable for us to do it as well. Imagine the segregation that people who are limping in schools and colleges face in that sense. So there has to be a balance, of course. I'm not saying that freedom of speech is not important, but freedom of speech should not come at the cost of dehumanizing persons with disabilities and segregating them from society further.
Right. Mr. Ravichandar, this is something that Arman Ali also talked about. What role do you think can platforms like YouTube or Insta play in regulating this kind of content?
Yes. Firstly, I think I'm on the same page with Radhika Bas when she said empathy is not something that gets inculcated. It grows with you. Now, you threw up a very interesting question. Is how is it that parents react when they see something like this? I think schools, colleges, education institutions, culturally, look at, let me tell you something very rudimentary. How many buildings in our country, including high courts, they do not have a area by which a physically challenged person can approach a court hall. Forget other aspects of the matter. So we are culturally indifferent to this. Today we've reached the other end of the pendulum where we can joke about them. Now, therefore, a systemic parallel will have to grow. Systems, people who speak about it will have to speak more vociferously about it. I'm going to unsubscribe these kind of people and say, no, this is not the kind of humor I want to listen to. These are not the kind of guys I want to listen to. And let's create a social angle from where we start socially boycotting this crass humor. I walk out of films where humor is crass. I walk out of every scenario where things are like this.
Right.
So we will have to create a counter culture of empathy. Empathy will not come through the corridors of the Supreme Court. 1. 2, understand. In the name of curtailing crass humor, we are giving the system a larger whip that can have serious side effects on society. Now, this, we are looking at it from a very, very sensitive telescope. Empathy, it's a no-brainer. I think all of us need to empathize. We are all so lucky that we are normal human beings in that sense of the word.
Right. Arman Ali, we're talking about just stand-up comics here, and I'm sorry to say that these conversations do go on, even in our circles and even amongst people who are able. So clearly there needs to be more that needs to be done to amplify voices of reason and also, ending this kind of conversations even in mainstream dialogue, right? Like, there are, we know our family members who talk of, who body shame each other. There are these reels that we watch, identifying people by their color, or for that matter, how fat they are, or how slim they are, or how short they are. How do we ensure that we, amplify the right voices and ensure that there is, there is dignity in conversations?
Vasudha, I must tell you and correct everyone here that do you think disabled people don't have humor? They don't have sense of humor? I mean, if me and Nipun meet, we keep bantering each other about our disability and, our own challenges and so on. It's not that we don't enjoy humor. We also joke about each other's disability. But, I just want to put one thing on record. A criminal case is not to create empathy. The criminal case is to get justice. There is a law, and it exists to, and this law is to protect, and these behaviors of humiliating people with disability cannot go unpunished. It dehumanizes disabled people. That's one. And number two, how much of homework are these people doing? Whoever, whether it's a filmmaker or influencers or comedians on disability. Do you know about it, or you just try to mimic disability? Is that all that you do? If you understand disability, if you do your homework, if you do your research, and then make your joke about us, like Nipun said, not about how we are, but what disables us. It's that what if you look at disability, it's not about the person, it's about the environment, it's about your inability to participate on an equal basis with others.
Right.
It's a system which is disabling us, and there are many other marginalized community in this country. I dare people make jokes about them.
Right.
It become a large political issue. It's because disabled people are invisible. And that's why you use law to bring more awareness. If somebody like Samay Raina can be put behind bar or pull up for this task, many other people will try to learn and put their mind to it, that what is the issue that you want to do. You watch movies from Hollywood, there's so much of humor around disability, and they also very systematically include disability into their various scenes by showing disabled parking and disabled people's movement. I don't see all that effort in our entertainment industry. It's only to ridicule disabled people, and the person with disabilities who are actually able to get education, higher education, if I might say, is only 0.05%. That's out of total population that you do. And the national average of a higher education in India is 27%.
Right.
So where are we? We are just pushing behind doors and walls one generation of disabled people, and this cannot be justified by any means.
Right. Closing remarks, Radhika. What would you like to say as part of your closing remarks?
I think, I'm 52 years old, and I've definitely in the past made jokes that I probably wouldn't now. And I completely agree that there is a line to be drawn between making fun of a situation that a disabled person may find themselves in and just mocking a disability, because that doesn't take talent, to mock a disability. Any fool can do it. And I don't think that's right. True comedy is about, you're right, it's about working with a theme.
Right.
It's about thinking about something a little bit more intellectually, and a lot of comedians pride themselves on doing that. In fact, and I can't remember her name right now, which is so unfortunate, there's a fantastic comedian who has Bell's palsy, and her whole act is about making fun of it, actually. And there are several comics internationally who do have various types of disabilities, and even in India, we have a comedian who's sight impaired, makes a lot of fun of that. And that's different from someone like me rocking up and then just making fun of, how someone looks. That's not comedy. And I just want to be very clear. I'm not defending Samay's joke, mainly because I do not even know what the joke is. I don't. I was begging the producers, you guys know what the joke is? And I looked all over to find out what did this person say. So I'm not defending the joke. I'm simply saying, as a comedian, many of us, me included, as sensitive as I may be, will cross some line at some point. And I worry that if everything comes down to a criminal case, what are we doing to people's ability to be creative? So my concern is slightly different, but I do not...
Nipun, closing remarks from you, sir.
In my closing remark, I just actually want to respond to Mr. Sridharan, I think his name was, one of the panelists, who spoke about, that is Samay Raina going to get empathy through this criminal case. To be very honest, I don't think any criminal case is done to really give empathy to the particular person. If a person does a murder and he's sent to jail, it's not to give him empathy, but it's to deter that person from doing more murders in that sense, right? So I think this criminal case against Samay Raina is to deter comedians from cracking such jokes, because these jokes create worse stereotypes, which are then cultivated through society, and they spread more negative stereotypes that already exist in society in that sense. So it's about creating more empathy in society. It's not about really making Samay Raina suddenly empathetic by sending him to jail in that sense. And that is the clarification that I wanted to make. Right. Something else, for example, Radhika spoke about a few fantastic points. Like, for example, there are ramps that are steep, and there are 3 people who are needed to take up a wheelchair up a ramp, or the fact that payments are so broken in Gurgaon. These are the things that need to be laughed at, and I think there can be a lot of good disability humor that can come out of these things. So I agree with Arman that we are not against disability jokes, but we are against jokes on persons with disabilities in that sense.
Right. Abha, something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I would like to say that the ultimate goal should be to create a digital culture that is safe for everyone. where the content promotes respect, inclusion, and understanding. So instead of mocking at marginalized people, influencers should be challenged to promote empathy and positive change.
Right. Thank you all of you for joining me on this broadcast, observing that the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression is not absolute. The Supreme Court bench today said that no one can be allowed to demean anybody under the garb of the right, and in fact it also mulled framing guidelines on social media content, especially that concerns disabled and people with rare disorders. In the last many years, we as a society have made significant gains in attempting to use language that's respectful, specifically to make us an inclusive society. It's important to build on those gains, not hurt, harm people with language. But how does one build that sensitivity amongst people in a society that often tends to normalize such disparaging language? That is a larger question here. You heard our panelists out. With that, it's time for a short break. More news and updates on the other side.